You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. The people domain carries substantial weight in the Project Management Professional exam, accounting for 42% of the total content. That percentage is worth reading slowly because it tells us that nearly half of what is tested touches on human dynamics. These questions often appear as situational scenarios, where the best next action depends less on process charts and more on how you interpret behavior, manage relationships, and foster collaboration. For learners, this means studying interpersonal skills is not optional background but a central component of project mastery. When a candidate encounters a question about scope or schedule, people issues often lurk just beneath the surface. Recognizing this allows a project manager to respond wisely instead of mechanically. When we shift into the mindset required for success in the people domain, it becomes clear that the project manager functions as more than a task director. The emphasis is on coaching, enabling, and protecting the team's flow of work. Escalation handing problems upward is always a last resort rather than a first instinct. By approaching leadership this way, a project manager creates an environment where team members feel trusted to resolve issues, experiment with solutions, and learn from setbacks. This does not mean ignoring problems. It means guiding resolution at the level closest to the work. The exam will often test whether you can distinguish between reflexively escalating and wisely empowering. A project's health in the people domain is often measured by indicators such as engagement, clarity, and psychological safety. Engagement shows up when team members contribute ideas freely and take ownership of results. Clarity emerges when roles, responsibilities, and goals are unambiguous. Psychological safety, the confidence that mistakes can be raised without ridicule, is the foundation that allows innovation and constructive debate. When these elements are present, performance flows naturally. They are harder to measure than earned value or velocity, but their absence creates inefficiencies that ripple through scope, cost, and schedule. People questions in the exam frequently disguise themselves within process or business environment contexts, so the learner must train to recognize the human element in every domain. The task map of the people domain reads almost like a catalog of human challenges a project manager faces daily. It begins with managing conflict, leading teams, supporting performance, and empowering individuals. It then spans areas such as training, building teams, and keeping knowledge flowing even as members come and go. Each of these tasks may look separate, but together they describe a cycle of human development within a project. The exam expects you to see the interplay. When you train, you also empower. When you remove obstacles, you also enhance performance. Project management here is less about isolated skills and more about orchestrating a living, breathing system of people and their interactions. Other key responsibilities within the task map include removing impediments, negotiating project agreements, and collaborating with stakeholders. Impediments can be as small as a missing tool or as large as a political barrier between departments. Negotiations are not just formal contracts, but also informal agreements about workload, timelines, or access to resources. Collaboration with stakeholders requires balancing needs, expectations, and influence so that no group feels overlooked. These are not soft extras. They determine whether deliverables are accepted or resisted. The PMP exam emphasizes them because they mirror the real experience of project managers in organizations where politics, expectations, and priorities constantly shift. Shared understanding is another recurring theme, particularly in virtual or distributed environments. Building this requires structured conversations, consensus-driven workshops, and transparency about decisions. Without shared understanding, even a technically flawless plan can unravel because people interpret commitments differently. Similarly, virtual teams introduce challenges of geography, culture, and technology that must be proactively addressed. Setting ground rules on communication, responsiveness, and etiquette creates the scaffolding for trust across distance. These elements are woven throughout the task map not as standalone activities, but as supporting threads that keep the project fabric intact. The exam often asks candidates to recognize when establishing these foundations is the right first step. Mentoring and emotional intelligence deserve special attention because they function as invisible multipliers of team performance. Mentoring means more than passing down knowledge. It is the deliberate act of investing in others' growth so they can handle greater responsibility. Emotional intelligence, often abbreviated as EI, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage both your emotions and those of others. Embedded throughout the people domain, EI enables you to sense tension before it becomes conflict, to read stakeholder cues in negotiation, and to adapt leadership style fluidly. The exam expects awareness of EI not as a theoretical concept, but as a daily discipline that shapes outcomes. Leadership lenses help us interpret how to approach different situations. One foundational model is servant leadership, where the project manager focuses on serving the team by removing barriers and enabling success. Another is situational leadership, which suggests there is no single best style but rather an adaptive approach based on team maturity and context. A new team may need directive guidance, while a seasoned group thrives under autonomy. By switching lenses thoughtfully, a project manager avoids rigidity and demonstrates versatility. The exam often asks candidates to recognize which lens best fits the scenario, testing whether they understand leadership as a living practice rather than a fixed trait. Part of leadership is knowing when to act as a convener versus when to act as a decider. Convening means bringing people together, facilitating conversation, and guiding toward consensus. Deciding means taking responsibility when consensus is not possible or when urgency demands clarity. Effective project managers discern when to lean into each role. Over-facilitation can stall momentum, while over-deciding can erode trust. The balance reflects maturity in leadership. In exam questions, answers that show thoughtful facilitation usually win out unless the scenario demands a swift decision to protect value or safety. This illustrates the importance of reading cues carefully rather than defaulting to one mode. Influence without authority is a defining reality of project management, especially in matrixed organizations where team members report to multiple managers. The project manager rarely controls salaries, promotions, or long-term career paths. Influence must therefore be earned through trust, credibility, and demonstrated competence. When negotiating with vendors or persuading cross-functional leaders, the ability to influence without formal power becomes a differentiator. Real-world success depends on this skill, and exam scenarios often reflect it. Candidates who understand that leadership is about influence rather than authority will more easily identify the most effective course of action in ambiguous situations. Ethical anchors form the bedrock of leadership practice. Responsibility, respect, fairness, and honesty are not abstract ideals, but guiding principles for daily choices. A project manager who avoids favoritism, admits mistakes, and honors commitments models integrity that strengthens stakeholder trust. These anchors also guide decisions in gray areas where processes offer no clear answer. For example, if a powerful stakeholder pressures you to cut corners, the ethical principles remind you that honesty and fairness outweigh expedience. The Project Management Institute embeds these values in its code of ethics, and exam questions frequently test whether you will act consistently with these standards even under pressure. Understanding team formation is another critical skill within the people domain. Teams typically progress through stages often described as forming, storming, norming, and performing. The forming stage is characterized by politeness and uncertainty, while storming involves conflict as roles and personalities clash. Norming signals emerging cohesion, and performing marks high efficiency and synergy. A project manager's role is to help teams move through storming quickly and constructively by fostering dialogue, clarifying roles, and reinforcing common goals. The exam often probes whether candidates understand that conflict is natural during storming, and that the goal is to shorten this phase, not to avoid it entirely. One technique for accelerating performance is using tools like skills matrices or RACI charts: responsible, accountable, consulted, informed. These frameworks bring clarity by mapping who does what, who decides, and who must be consulted. Clarity in roles reduces duplication, prevents dropped tasks, and builds confidence that responsibilities are well understood. Pairing team members with complementary skills also strengthens collaboration and spreads expertise. For example, a senior analyst paired with a junior colleague can both accelerate work and create a natural mentoring relationship. Such practices reduce storming and push the team faster toward the performing stage where value is delivered consistently. Building trust in hybrid and remote teams requires deliberate effort. Physical separation can make small misunderstandings grow quickly into large rifts. A project manager must therefore design touchpoints that encourage transparency, such as regular video check-ins or shared digital boards where progress is visible. Trust is also built through consistency, showing up on time, following through on commitments, and acknowledging contributions. When teams sense reliability across distance, they develop confidence in one another. In exam contexts, the best answer often involves proactive trust building in remote settings, rather than waiting for problems to appear. Coaching microbehaviors is another subtle but powerful way project managers influence team performance. Microbehaviors include listening attentively, acknowledging ideas, or modeling calmness under stress. While each behavior seems small, over time they compound to create a culture of respect and resilience. A leader who consistently demonstrates curiosity in team ideas encourages experimentation. One who celebrates small wins builds momentum. These are not dramatic acts of leadership, but daily deposits in the trust bank. The PMP exam rewards candidates who recognize that leadership is enacted through consistent small behaviors rather than only through grand strategies or directives. Communication patterns bring these themes into sharp focus. Establishing cadence, choosing appropriate channels, and agreeing on clarity norms is often done through working agreements created with the team. Cadence means the rhythm of updates, daily stand-ups, weekly reviews, or monthly stakeholder demos. Channels can include email, instant messaging, or visual dashboards. Clarity norms might involve defining what "done" means or how to flag blockers. By co-creating these agreements, the project manager ensures communication is not arbitrary but intentional. The exam expects you to know that establishing norms proactively prevents confusion later, which is always better than reacting after miscommunication has already derailed progress. Active listening is a cornerstone of effective communication. It means not only hearing the words, but also understanding the intent behind them. Techniques include summarizing back what was said, asking clarifying questions, and confirming mutual understanding before decisions are made. These practices reduce errors and signal respect to team members and stakeholders. For example, when a stakeholder describes a need vaguely, the project manager who reflects back in precise terms ensures alignment. In exam scenarios, the correct answer often emphasizes listening and confirming over speaking quickly or assuming understanding. The choice between asynchronous and synchronous communication is especially relevant in global teams. Synchronous means real-time interactions like meetings or calls, while asynchronous involves messages, recordings, or documents that can be consumed later. Each has advantages. Synchronous builds immediacy and rapport, while asynchronous respects time zones and reduces meeting fatigue. A skilled project manager balances both, ensuring critical decisions are handled in real time, but routine updates are shared asynchronously. Cultural considerations also matter. Some cultures expect more direct dialogue, while others prefer written records. Exam scenarios often test whether candidates appreciate these nuances and select communication methods that fit both context and team composition. Escalation paths are an important aspect of communication, but they must be handled carefully. Visibility of the path, who to approach when an issue cannot be resolved, is essential. However, normalizing escalation as the default undermines accountability and problem-solving within the team. The project manager's responsibility is to clarify the path while fostering a culture where issues are first addressed collaboratively at the lowest level. In the exam, answers that reflexively escalate tend to be incorrect, whereas those that encourage problem-solving and only escalate when necessary are favored. This balance captures the essence of empowering teams while ensuring support is available when truly needed. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Conflict in projects can arise from many sources, and understanding them is the first step to effective management. Differences in goals often create tension, especially when stakeholders prioritize conflicting outcomes. Role confusion can lead to frustration when responsibilities overlap or remain unclear. Resource constraints, whether time, money, or staff, introduce competition that sparks disagreements. Values and information can also be flashpoints, particularly when cultural norms or data interpretations differ. A skilled project manager learns to identify these root causes rather than treating symptoms. The exam often presents conflict scenarios that test whether you can see beneath surface behavior and name the underlying driver. Recognizing the source allows you to select a resolution method aligned with the actual problem. Once the source is understood, the project manager must choose an appropriate conflict resolution approach. Collaboration or problem-solving seeks win-win outcomes and is often ideal when time allows. Compromise means each side gives up something, useful when stakes are moderate. Smoothing emphasizes areas of agreement while downplaying differences, a temporary measure to preserve relationships. Forcing or directing imposes a decision quickly but can harm trust if overused. Withdrawal means stepping back to cool tensions, but it risks leaving issues unresolved. The exam often asks candidates to select the method that balances urgency, relationship importance, and project impact. Knowing the pros and cons of each technique makes these questions approachable. Closing the loop after conflict resolution is a subtle but essential behavior. It is not enough to end an argument in the moment. The project manager must ensure agreements stick and relationships heal. This means documenting decisions when appropriate, confirming mutual understanding, and checking in later to verify commitments were upheld. A short follow-up conversation often prevents the same issue from resurfacing. It also signals to team members that resolution is not just about speed, but about sustainability. In exam scenarios, answers that emphasize follow-up and reinforcement typically reflect the deeper understanding PMI wants to see conflict resolution as a continuous cycle, not a one-time event. Empowerment is another central theme in the people domain. Delegation with guardrails is the art of assigning authority while clarifying boundaries. A project manager defines decision rights clearly, what team members can decide independently, what requires consultation, and what must escalate. This not only accelerates work but also builds ownership. When individuals feel trusted, they tend to rise to the challenge. The exam often highlights situations where the best step is to delegate thoughtfully rather than holding control tightly. Delegation demonstrates confidence in the team and creates capacity for the project manager to focus on higher-level risks and stakeholder engagement. Training is closely tied to empowerment because people cannot own responsibilities they are not prepared for. Skills gaps appear constantly in projects as new tools, processes, or challenges emerge. Just-in-time training offers focused support when a task demands it, while mentoring provides longer-term growth. Pairing experienced team members with newer ones accelerates both performance and learning. A project manager who invests in training creates resilience because knowledge spreads, rather than concentrating in a few individuals. Exam questions often point toward training as the best answer when performance problems arise, not punishment, but enabling through skill development. A learning cadence strengthens both agile and predictive environments. In agile contexts, retrospectives create recurring opportunities to improve. In predictive settings, lessons learned meetings serve a similar role, albeit at longer intervals. The key is consistency, embedding learning into the rhythm of work so that improvement is expected, not optional. This cadence reinforces a growth mindset and signals that the team is valued for more than immediate output. The PMP exam values answers that demonstrate commitment to continuous improvement, especially when framed as collective learning rather than individual blame. Tracking enablement outcomes requires care to avoid bureaucracy. Rather than creating burdensome metrics, effective project managers look for qualitative indicators. Are team members taking initiative, solving problems independently, and mentoring others? Short surveys, informal check-ins, or observation provide insight into whether empowerment is working. Excessive paperwork erodes trust, while thoughtful feedback loops strengthen it. In exam scenarios, expect answers that emphasize light-touch evaluation of empowerment and training rather than heavy reporting systems. This reinforces the principle that people flourish under supportive guidance, not rigid monitoring. Stakeholder collaboration extends beyond polite communication. It involves actively co-creating outcomes. Mapping stakeholders by interest, influence, and impact helps prioritize engagement strategies. Those with high influence and interest demand close partnership, while others may require less frequent touchpoints. This mapping avoids wasted effort and ensures energy goes where it matters most. The PMP exam frequently embeds these dynamics in situational questions, asking you to identify which stakeholder needs attention first or how to balance competing demands. Understanding that not all stakeholders are equal in power or priority is essential for effective collaboration. True collaboration means involving stakeholders early in defining requirements and acceptance criteria. Co-creation prevents surprises later by ensuring stakeholders see their fingerprints on deliverables. It also strengthens buy-in, since people support what they help shape. A project manager who facilitates these conversations avoids the trap of presenting finished products that stakeholders resist. In the exam, answers that highlight early engagement and visible documentation of agreements usually align with best practices. This reflects the reality that shared ownership is easier to build up front than to repair later. Disagreement among stakeholders is inevitable, but it can be managed productively. Clarifying the value being pursued, the constraints in play, and the trade-offs available allows debate to remain constructive. Instead of asking who is right, the project manager frames the discussion around which option best advances agreed objectives within given constraints. This reframing shifts the energy from personal conflict to collective problem-solving. The exam often tests whether candidates recognize the value of reframing disagreements in terms of value and trade-offs rather than authority or personal preference. Documenting agreements visibly is an often overlooked practice that cements collaboration. Whether through shared project dashboards, signed minutes, or public charters, making agreements transparent reduces the chance of selective memory later. Visibility creates accountability without needing constant reminders. In exam scenarios, answers that emphasize documentation and transparency typically score better than those that assume verbal commitments are enough. This principle illustrates how small administrative habits can have outsized effects on trust and alignment in complex projects. Virtual teams add another layer of complexity, and success depends on establishing working agreements early. Time zones, response expectations, and tool choices should be clarified explicitly. Without these agreements, misunderstandings multiply and resentment grows. Rituals like daily stand-ups, sprint demos, or retrospectives become anchors that keep dispersed teams connected. These rituals are not just meetings, they are cultural glue that reinforces belonging. In the PMP exam, the correct action often involves proactively defining virtual norms rather than waiting for conflict to highlight gaps. Remote communication strips away tone and body language, making misunderstandings more likely. A project manager must therefore model patience and verify meaning before reacting. Etiquette around chat, email, and video calls plays a larger role than many anticipate. Clear subject lines, Timely responses and respectful scheduling across time zones build goodwill. Exam questions increasingly reflect virtual dynamics, asking how to adapt communication when teams are dispersed. Candidates who understand the nuances of remote etiquette will find these questions less intimidating. The exam angle brings all these people domain lessons into focus. Common traps include escalating too quickly, trying to do everything personally, or making unilateral decisions without alignment. These may feel decisive in the moment but undermine trust and collaboration. PMI designs questions to reward answers that analyze impact, engage stakeholders, and foster shared understanding before action. Facilitation, not domination, is often the winning path. Reading people cues, such as hesitation, resistance, or enthusiasm, becomes as important as reading charts or schedules. Success in this domain lies in seeing leadership not as a series of commands, but as a practice of creating environments where people thrive. When preparing for people domain questions, always remember that PMI favors facilitation and empowerment over control. The exam is not testing how fast you can solve problems personally, but how effectively you can create conditions for teams and stakeholders to succeed. By internalizing this perspective, you not only improve your test performance, but also grow as a project leader in practice. The ability to guide, support, and inspire people is what ultimately turns processes and plans into meaningful results. That is the heart of the people domain, and it is why it commands such weight in the PMP framework. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.